Today Africa Podcast is a podcast series where we interview African entrepreneurs and professionals and share the stories behind their businesses. In each interview, we ask how they got started, how they grew, and how they run their business today. The stories are inspiring and also provide specific advice and insight into starting a business. By sharing these stories, we want to help others get started.
Welcome to Today Africa podcast, a series of conversation with African entrepreneurs, business leaders, change makers who are shaping the future of the continent. Joining me is Ayoola Ogunyomi. He's the co-founder and CEO of Umbrella. Umbrella is a dedicated marketplace for startup investment and exits in Africa, connecting viable African founders with potential investors. And today we'll be discussing how Ayoola and his team are tackling the investment and exit gap in Africa, supporting African founders to be investment ready and equally building a pipeline for viable African startups. Ogunyomi, you are welcome.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me today, Africa.
I know that you are the co-founder and CEO of Umbrella, but I believe that there is Ayoola outside being the co-founder and CEO of Umbrella. So could you please tell us who Ayoola is?
Okay. I see myself as an innovator. I've been within the marketing space. I've spent 14 years building brands, building businesses, also building people. I do a lot of mentorship, a lot of career talks with upgrowing people in the field of marketing. And then I just find myself having a very curious mind around tech, right? And that has led me to be at the forefront of it, from cryptocurrency to blockchain to AI to data science to design thinking as well. I've pivoted into those industries beyond just being a marketing expert. And then investment for me as well has been a thing of passion. I've invested as well in a couple of businesses. I've also grown a business for over 6 years at Field, growing that business. And that pushed me back into paid employment. And beyond that, I like to study a lot. I spend my time, just reading and, amassing knowledge. Basically, that's me. I work as hard as I play. Let me put it that way.
Okay, let's talk about Umbrella. I know it's a marketplace, yes. So what inspired the creation of Umbrella and how did you identify this investment exit gap?
All right. We created Umbrella because we wanted to solve a problem we saw firsthand. African founders struggle to raise capital, and investors often lacked credible and viable, African startup, or even access or visibility to investment-ready startup. The pipelines were getting blurry. There was no trusted, structured way to invest in or exit an African venture. And then, of course, exits at the time when we started building Umbrella, especially, were very rare. So we decided to build Umbrella as a verified marketplace to bridge this gap, making African startup more discoverable, fundable, and ultimately investable. And then with also a clear exit strategy, because at that time, we had been to other African countries like Rwanda, Kenya, and then we had seen how founders struggle to raise in that market. So it wasn't a peculiar problem to just Nigeria. It was a peculiar problem to other African countries. And then we put out a couple of surveys to other founders in other regions. And then we started to have our first set of, product market fit. And then we started to speak to VCs and angel investors within the space to also understand the problem, why they found it very hard to invest in African founders.
All right. Why did you choose the name Umbrella?
All right, I'll tell you I'll tell you the story, right? And it's very interesting a story. I, I, I started off my career in marketing. I had a lot of mentors. I had two or three mentors at that time, and I probably wouldn't have gotten to the stage I got to today if I didn't have mentors who created pathways for me, right? Who showed me some, the way to navigate the terrain, right? And one of the problems we saw as well when we wanted to build Umbrella, it's not like founders don't build great products. But beyond the products, we also realized that some founders needed mentors, they needed advisors, they needed people who could help them navigate certain terrains. It goes beyond you just sitting behind your systems or having that great ideas, right? So um, while we wanted to bring the founders and investors on one side, we needed to also bring the advisors into the pictures, right? And we all know that umbrella is that thing that protects you, whether from sun, whether from rain, right? So it gives you that shield, right? So what we wanted to do beyond just bringing those three players into the ecosystem, we also wanted to build trust. We wanted to be that shield, So we just kept thinking, well, what will it be? What would the name be? From branding experience, we wanted something that resonated, something that would stay. We didn't need to explain further, right? By just saying it, we're bringing you under one umbrella. We're bringing those players under one umbrella. Why we kept saying that in the room, we want to bring everybody into one umbrella. It just kept ringing that. It seems like that's actually what the brand name would be. So actually, the company name is called Use Umbrella, but the product is called Umbrella.
Your aim with Umbrella is to bridge the investment exit gap between startup founders, investors, and advisors. So, can you elaborate on the specific challenges in African startup system that Umbrella is addressing?
So we are addressing like four major challenges, and there are four big ones to be very honest. Access, which is of course most founders aren't connected to capital or advisory network. Access as well on the side of investors to credible and verified or well vetted African founders. And then on the investors, on the advisory side of it, and as well as the ecosystem players, access to high potential or high growth founders or high impact founders, right? So we're creating access to three different people. Trust, of course, trust is very important in doing business, right? So investors need more transparency and due diligence, right? And you need the local markets who understand the local markets to be able to do the due diligence for you. Part of the things we also realize is that the time of travel, right, when it comes to investment in startup, takes a longer time, especially when it's a global investor. If it's an angel investor, a local investor, and the time to travel might not be that much, right? But as you advance in stage of your startup journey, right, due diligence becomes very important. Transparency becomes very important. So we decided to launch that. Most recently, we're going to be launching our first deal lounge. It's called the Deals Lounge, where investors can interact basically with the founders on Umbrella. Liquidity as well is also one of the things that we wanted to address, right? Exits are rare, so we needed secondary sales and acquisition. We wanted to make that easy, secondary sales and acquisition, making it easy for founders to exit, also making it easy for investors who have invested in founders to also exit through Umbrella, right? So as an investor, you can come on Umbrella, you can say you want to sell off the shares that you have, and then of course, or the equity that you have in certain businesses, and then we would have people pick up those from Umbrella. And of course, support is in three folds, right? From the expertise side of view, from the localized guidance, and then of course from an advisory service point of view, and we do this with two products that we have. And the Umbrella Saturday, we kicked off with two episodes already. We're having the third one this weekend, and then Tech Garage, which basically is just honest bunch of conversations between founders, investors, and advisors. Basically, because we also see that when founders get rejected, they have the generic rejection messages from either VCs or accelerators, right? So we're bringing some of these guys to come and really tell why most founders didn't go through the stages basically.
Will help facilitate buying, selling, investing, and exiting. So, how do people come on board to handle these four major things, which are buying, selling, investing, and exit?
All right, great question, and thanks for that. We provide a verified pipeline of vetted startups with data rooms, traction reports, and exit options, right? Investors can browse through these opportunities or receive direct deal flows from us through their dashboards. Founders can raise capital, they can sell their equity, or even plan an exit, right, with our help. And beyond that, we also create like a transparent matchmaking with inbuilt, advisory services, and we also offer post deal support, right? So beyond just buying or selling or funding or exit, we also ensure that we do some post deal support. And post deal support goes as far as even the mental health of the founders themselves, right? We partners with some mental health um, organizations, right, or individuals who help founders go through the challenges and painstaking that they take or they go through every day in just building their products or even trying to run a business. So we do all that. Like we said, it's an ecosystem. We're building an ecosystem where every player within the investment or land or startup space, whether you're a venture builder or just a business offering services and products to founders, Umbrella basically just creates that pathway to founders and investors.
We hear startup announcing investments, they're selling, they're buying, but I hardly hear about startup or a founder announcing that he's exiting his startup or he's exiting his company. So why is the announcement of exit low compared to when a startup is raising funds?
All right. So there's the pride when you raise money, right? There's that joy when you raise money, and I think that the joy should also be there when you also exit, your business as well. You hear foreign founders say, "Oh, so and so founder exited from maybe Paystack, for instance, or something, right?" And then this founder um, has become an angel now because he's raised money, he's sold his equity, he has money to invest now in other businesses, or he's pivoting into something else. In Africa, right, we sometimes see exit as the founders, there's a problem in the business, the founder is not doing well, or there's the red flag in that business, or maybe they were actually just bought over, right? But exit happens, right? It's currently happening. You see some mergers, you see some acquisitions happening, and these things have been there right from time, right? So again, the founders go underground most times when they exit. Sometimes they go into new ventures. They announce the new ventures. They just announce the raise for the new businesses that they're doing, rather than also announcing that they've exited, right? But that's what we want to do with Umbrella, where founders are also proud to have exited a good business, right, or a good startup that they've been able to build over the years, right? So we expect that we see more M&As, we see more acquisitions, we see more mergers, we see more secondary market sales, IPOs coming in, from some of even the unicorns that we've seen, and even some seed stage or pre-seed startup, getting acquired by, other ventures across Africa, and that's the goal for us at Umbrella. So you will see more of that happening as time goes on. I think that founders are getting ripe for exits, and these conversations actually needs to start happening.
All right. Why I'm asking this is because people are now have raised these, but when they exit, sometimes they will just move out quietly, and the next thing you hear that they have announced their new venture and they have already raised money. And that brings me to my next question. I don't understand why a startup founder will raise millions of dollars and within 2 years they're shutting down. Some of them will announce that probably the product was not fit for the market. And I'm like, when you were raising the money, did you know that the product was not fit for the market? I want to understand why a startup will raise money and before you know it, they are shutting down?
All right. I see it from three perspectives. The first perspective for me is that don't raise funds for the wrong reasons, right? You are indebted to the investors, right? Investments in startup is high risk, and I'm sure that investors in those startups were aware. And one of the things that really bothers us as well as Umbrella is proper DD, proper due diligence. If proper due diligence were done, right, and if how transparent enough were those founders, right? And I've worked in a couple of startups as well as an individual who has headed marketing in some of those startups. And we've seen a couple of them actually shut down, not because the business was not good. It's possible because of the lifestyle of the founders, right? It's also possible that they didn't take into consideration certain things, right? Regulatory authorities or regulations within those terrains as well could actually shut down a very good business with a high potential, right? So it goes, there are many metrics, right, that you need to actually consider, when it comes to why a startup actually shut down. And the truth about it is that maybe in future, maybe Umbrella will do some case studies around what really led to those startups shutting down, right? From a honest point of view, right? But the books also matters, right? If you look at the books, again, we say things like wrong way. What was the wrong way of the business? What was the burn rate of the business, right? There are some metrics that founders need to check, right? Are they checking the metrics that matter? These vanity metrics when you are looking at the total number of downloads, and we've seen that the industry has pivoted, right? There used to be a time when you just need to have a lot of downloads on the Play Store, Apple Store, and you would raise. And then we moved from that to raising with just your pitch deck. Now investors have raised the bars, right? Investors are becoming smarter, with their investment, right? So there are a lot of things around why a startup will fail, right? I don't think that failing is also wrong. I think that it's how you pick yourself up when you fail, right? So yes, a business could have failed trying to do a particular model, right? Again, the business model takes me to the business model, right? What was the business model? What were the avenues to which funds were flowing into the business, right? And then did they test out the business model, right? It's beyond you just sitting down on your screen and saying that people will pay for subscription. Do you understand the nuances in the market where you want to operate, right? Maybe far back at 2020 or early 2000s, right? We would have thought that maybe if you said to someone, you needed to subscribe, it was probably very wet, within the African landscape. But now people do subscription without thinking about it, right? So the models differs, right? You need to understand what the market is saying. You need to speak to your customers, right? So one of the reasons why this startup really fails most times is that they are way further from their customers. They assume that they build the product that's are of interest to the customers, not necessarily identifying the pain points from the customer's perspective. And then the last thing I would say is that one of the reasons why a startup would also fail is when when your financial projections are not realistic, when your valuation of the business itself is not realistic. You have the tendencies to fail because you put yourself at an edge where you're going to be chasing ghost numbers. Let me put it that way.
One of the things you mentioned that Umbrella offers advisory cohorts and master classes. So, what role
Yeah.
or what roles do advisory cohorts and master classes play in supporting startup founders?
Our advisory model pairs founders with seasoned operators and domain experts, right? Locally and globally. These advisors help startups with fundraising strategies, financial model, or modeling, investors prep, and even go to market execution, even as far as legal compliance issues, everything that makes the startup ecosystem work. And the result of this for us is we ensure that there's a faster fundraising, there's better decision making on the part of the founders, because of course they have advisors who are offering them the best of their knowledge, right? So these advisors could even be in the same industry as the founder who is trying to get into that industry, speaking from an early stage founder perspective, or even we've seen partnership happen from advisory conversations, right, where the founder needs certain help, and those are probably his challenges, and the other person on the other side who is an advisor to him can even offer that service to the founder, right? So it's for us, advisory is a stronger path to growth, and we look at it from a community perspective. With Umbrella Saturday, what we've been able to do is to bring founders and some of these domain experts or seasoned experts or operators into the room, and then they're having real conversations, right? And founders are coming out to bear their burden, right? And then these guys are looking at it from also the perspective of how to help founders navigate those terrains, and also that's how the advisory works, and that's the impact basically on founders and startups generally in Africa. Like I said earlier, again, mentorship, and we look at advisory from the positioning of mentorship, right? Earlier this year, I personally sought, to look for 3 advisors who I felt will be significantly very impactful to my business, or to the business of Umbrella. And we've been able to, pivot from some of the challenges that we had, or they've been able to even help us navigate some of those paths. So I think that every startup to have an advisor on their team, it helps.
Beside the advisory cohort and the masterclass you mentioned, what other ways does Umbrella support these startup funders?
All right, so our system is a self-service system. It's a SaaS product where founders go through an investment readiness process. There's a data room where you have a data room. We have a multi-stage verification process for founders. We help them with the due diligence service with the help of our third-party partners and ourselves, internal team. And we also help, with some business model, validation. We also help to put the founders out there with checks on their attractions. We put them in front of investors with respect to deal rooms, facilitations, and we connect them to grants, also connect them to investors' pipelines that we have. But of course, like we said, we only do this by just vetting and verifying that the founders are investment ready. Basically, yeah. So those are some of the helps that we give founders on our end. Okay. And of course, we have a community, just to say, we have a community called the African Founders Community, which is like a WhatsApp group where founders within the communities can join. And we ourselves also belong to a couple of other communities where we, basically connect with founders and then take some of the stories to the right ears for capital raise.
Speaking about the African Founders Committee, so what role does this committee play in the growth of these startup funders?
Well, committee for us is a peer-led space. We currently have over 250 founders who share knowledge, collaborate, they grow together. We also have advisors and investors in the mix, right? Who offer feedbacks, right? Warm introductions, deal opportunities. It's a committee where community itself meets capital and collaborations. That's what we like to say, right? So it's a lounge where you meet people, you meet capital, you meet collaborations, and that's what basically we offer with our community, the African Founders Community.
One of the things people do in Umbrella is providing a pipeline for vectored startups, like you said. So
yes.
So how do you ensure the quality and the viability of these startups to boost, the investors' confidence?
We score each deal for investors' fit, right, and align them with the right risk person. or risk appetites for the investors, right? And how do we do this? Like I said earlier, we have a multi-stage verification process, a screening process. There's a traction check, there's a founders interviews, and the business model validation that we do on Umbrella. And then we score each of these deals for investors. Fit. We match investors with their interest. Of course, we make use of a smart matching system. Private stage for us would be that we're moving into some AI integrations, where some smart matching systems would pivot into the AI integration side of things. But of course, we match investors with the right risk appetite with founders, right? And then we build investors' trust by ensuring that the startup are truly ready. They have a DD check on them, and they have a verified tick on Umbrella once they get into the marketplace.
Trust is a very scarce commodity in Africa. Let me not narrow it down to Nigeria. In Africa, it's very So how did you build trust? Whereby investors trust your brand, actually team trust your brand, and even startup founders trust your brand.
All right, thank you. So, like I said earlier, around the conversations we had, I said that we just didn't build the products because we wanted to build the products. We reached out to founders, we reached out to investors. On the investor side, largely the bulk of the conversations came around, trust, navigating the African terrain, not understanding the regulatory, and compliance issues, right? Some heavy conversations around governance and the rest of it. We understand at Umbrella that building trust in a low trust environment is one of our biggest challenge, right? And that's why we always say to VCs that we like to see them as partners, because through our platform, it just helps save the time for them to travel with deals as well, especially when you are dealing with capital, right? We have learned that transparency, verified data, consistent value delivery are non-negotiable at Umbrella, right? And then also, African founders need more than just capital. To be very honest, they need clarity, they need community, they need expert guidance to scale, right? So for us, trust is what Umbrella is all about, right? It's what encompasses our mission to African founders, right? Just creating that trusted ecosystem. I'll just quickly go back to some conversations I've had with some VCs around, founders that they invested in through just warm introduction. Just because I've invested in founder A and I trust founder A and his business is doing well, as A does a warm introduction to me as an investor, and instead of doing my complete DD on that, I just trust that, okay, but because this person came from this person who is already becoming a unicorn or on the stage to becoming a unicorn, and my investment is going well with this guy, I think that I can trust that this introduction is good, right? And this happens based on this happens on VC side of things, it happens on scout side of things, and so investors have gotten their hands burnt, right? You see some investors tell you, I'm not looking the way of Africa, or not even looking the way of Nigeria right now, or any other African countries to be specific, because these problems are not just a Nigerian problem, they're an African-wide problem. And once we don't fix the trust, once we don't do the right due diligence, once we don't get the founders ready for investment, when we don't, teach and guide the founders to get ready and focus more on revenue rather than capital, we'll still have the problems that we see, or the challenge is not going to go anywhere. And you're right to say that you get a lot of founders raise money and then after a while they shut down. And this is just because the founders focus more on capital and they feel that fundraising was the only thing that can take them to the next stage. I'm not saying that at a very early stage you shouldn't go for fundraising, but of course you should also put your eyes on the revenue, right? Because you could raise all that money and then the revenue doesn't come in. You could get all the money for the marketing, for the product, for the operations of your business, but if the revenue is not coming in, the business is still going to shut down. So every founder should have their eyes on revenue rather than capital, and leave Umbrella to fix the capital for you.
Today Africa Podcast is a podcast series where we interview African entrepreneurs and professionals and share the stories behind their businesses. In each interview, we ask how they got started, how they grew, and how they run their business today. The stories are inspiring and also provide specific advice and insight into starting a business. By sharing these stories, we want to help others get started.